Finally, our Thursday night special segment, People You Should Know. As a boy, Bob's friends nicknamed him Hopeless because he failed at nearly everything. In sports, nobody wanted him on their team because he wasn't good enough. After college, he, his wife, and their baby found themselves on food stamps because there were very few decent-paying jobs. Hopeless wondered if things would ever get better. Well, they did, because he didn't give up. And last week, 240,000 of you decided to give him a new title, Lieutenant Governor. Lieutenant Governor Bob Weygand.
The first time I remember really feeling a certain degree of confidence was when I played what was then called preteen football. It's now Pop Warner football for a team in Pawtucket called the Darlington Braves. And they picked me, and I was one of the last kids to get picked, simply because I happened to tackle a kid the right way, and a coach saw it and said, "What's your name, kid?" And all of a sudden you'd hear your name called off over the loudspeaker, tackled by number 20, Bob Weygand.
Yet when Democrat Weygand first ran for state representative in 1984, he ran as an independent. Why?
Filing the papers as an independent, simply because I didn't think the Democrats or the Republicans or anybody who knew who I was, first of all, but really wanted me as a candidate.
And he won. And of course, he became a household name when he turned in Pawtucket Mayor Brian Serault for trying to bribe him. Bob Weygand, one of the people you should know. And turning now to tonight's special segment, People You Should Know. Tonight we'll tell you about John. He was a real loner as a kid. In fact, he was poor. At school, bullies teased him relentlessly about his looks, even his ears. In high school, you'd never see him at school parties or at proms or, for that matter, running for student council. But later on, this loner would become one of the most outspoken people in Rhode Island, Republican Party chairman. He bashed the Democrats so badly in 1983, Republicans started winning elections. A proud moment for John Holmes, who ended up getting a thank you call from Washington.
Sure enough, this gentleman came on the telephone and said, "Mr. Holmes, this is President Reagan. I just wanted to congratulate you." And I didn't have an opportunity I didn't give him an opportunity to finish. I said, "Give me a break." You know, I thought it was one of my crazy friends from Washington, D.C. And sure enough, I embarrassed myself because it was the president.
Reagan invited him to a big White House luncheon. By the way, this was just after the Soviets had shot down Korean Flight 007. That prompted John Holmes to ask the president this.
"What was your most immediate thought, sir?" And without skipping a beat, he leaned into the table and he said, "Mr. Holmes, my most immediate thought was to bomb those bastards." So I leaned into the table and said, "Mr. President, keep your voice down. Somebody could hear you." And I thought to myself as I sat back in the chair, what am I doing? Telling the most powerful man in the world to keep quiet.
And that's a little-known story about John Holmes. And finally, one of the people you should know. As a little girl, Karen was tormented by her nickname, which was Bucky Beaver. Her friends, thanks to her buck teeth. Now, she says you won't even find a childhood picture of her smiling. Yep, it was that bad. But at 15, Karen got a job to pay for the braces on her teeth. After that, life got a lot better. She went on to become Miss Warwick, and then, a couple of years after that, Miss Rhode Island. That was Karen Salvatore back in 1974. But today, you may recognize her for other reasons.
It has to be, and it is, a statewide issue, and they have to concentrate on. This affects everybody and their children and their children.
The ex-beauty queen started Dot Watch. That's a consumer watchdog group that battles state highway projects and the proposed airport expansion. But her road to the Miss America pageant was much more troubled than I've let on. While braces straightened her teeth at 15, 2 years later, a terrible four-car rear-end collision shattered her face, knocking out her teeth.
I bounced off that car, went over 2 lanes, and hit a wall. In the process, my jaw broke the steering wheel. They wired the jaw back into place, and the bottom teeth, they just set them back up again, and they took. And it took 10 years to really put me back together again. Mostly because I didn't have the money to go to the right specialist from the beginning.
But that didn't stop her. 2 years later, she was chosen Miss Rhode Island.
I just decided that I should set the goal of becoming Miss Rhode Island and just snap out of it, so I did. I did the pageant again, and I won.
And finally, one of the people you should know. Now, they called him Skis because of his size 14 shoe that went with his 6'6" body. The man was in law enforcement, and one challenge early on was to get a jailed mobster to squeal on the mob. Now, the negotiations had to be top secret or the informant risked being killed. Well, Skis got the bright idea of moving the informant to the out-of-the-way Newport Navy base jail. Only Skis never bothered to tell the Navy what he was up to. It turned into a real comedy sketch. Here was a law enforcement flat out lying about who he was to get onto the base. He also lied about the identity of his prisoner. And Skis tricked a base commander into signing the prisoner in. But all this blew up when the military's highest-ranking officer visited the base, Joint Chiefs of Staff Chairman Admiral Elmo Zumwalt. Yet Skis, better known to us today as U.S. Attorney Lincoln Almond, says he's glad he did all this because of who the informant was.
Dennis Raimondi. Yeah, he was at one time a chauffeur for Raymond L.S. Patriarca. He gave us information on union corruption. He gave us the mafia ceremony. He identified a significant number of members of the New England Mafia. So he provided us with excellent intelligence.
But Almond got into trouble when they got word that the mob knew that Raimondi was at the base and was squealing. So then, of course, the Navy had to be told. But the Navy then overreacted, putting the base on full alert, just as Admiral Zumwalt was about to visit the base.
And it took them an hour and a half to 2 hours to go home base because of the security alert. And we had held up the opening of the Naval War College for an entire morning. And he ordered me to have that prisoner out of there in 1 hour. Yeah, he was Top Gun. When Zumwalt spoke, you jumped.
And finally tonight, one of the people you should know. The Evans boy grew up in New York City's worst neighborhood. He came from a broken home. When he was in the 3rd grade, his dad was supposed to bring him a costume for school, but the costume never made it. You see, his dad had been gunned down. Later, relatives would bring the boy to South Providence. But he was poorly disciplined and he missed an awful lot of school. Still, he managed to win basketball honors both in high school as well as at CCRI. But only now is he beginning to straighten out. You see, Abdul Evans is now known to you and me as Abdul Abdullah, point guard for the PC Friars, a survivor toughened by the murder of his dad.
A bullet to the back of the head. So I guess he was walking and a car or whatever came up from behind and shot and killed him.
They were fine to do it?
No. Hanging with thugs or drug dealers, whatever, you know.
Would you hang with them?
Yeah, because I felt like I'm living my life and they're living their life.
Abdul stays away from them and disavows their ways, but he remembers how they stuck by him when other people didn't.
I remember being ineligible, seeing it on the news and reading it in the paper and wondering why everyone had to know. You know, I would just say, why does everyone got to know that I'm ineligible? And then hearing people say, oh, this kid is so dumb. Why, you know, why does he keep being ineligible?
And he admits that his laziness and his poor discipline have made him his own worst enemy.
But the thing that kept me going was the chance to stick it in people's faces, you know, and show them, you know, what I really had inside me, and, which was a lot of determination. I was determined to make it.
One of the people you should know set out to be a professional skier. He also got an award for risking his life trying to save people whose plane had crashed in the Vermont mountains. You see, Ned loved skiing so much that he ran a restaurant hoping that would support his skiing. Keep in mind, he didn't have a dime. But strangely enough, it was that restaurant that created an incredible career for him. By the time he was in his mid-30s, Ned was a millionaire. Ned. You see, Ned is Ned Grace, the owner of Capitol Grill, Hemingway's, the Old Grist Mill, Bugaboo Creek, and about 37 other restaurants around the country.
Money is not a goal for me. Success is a goal for me, and I don't really, you know, pay a lot of attention to the money part.
Along the way, Ned was also fascinated by this. It's called an amphibious aircraft. Over 10 years ago, he was the largest distributor of the aircraft in America. It can go almost anywhere and frequently does. Ned loved the maneuverability of it. In fact, he raced them. Won the slalom races at the International Seaplane Show in Greenville, Maine. Now that race requires the pilot to zigzag the $300,000 aircraft through an obstacle course, going fast, but without the plane taking off.
Well, it's real exciting. You go around pylons and you're going about 65 miles an hour on the water and making all kinds of turns, and you have to make a big turn and go back through the pylons and head towards town into Greenville. And you're going so fast you're about to take off, so it's kind of hairy.
As Ned Grace says, he always liked things that were just a little dangerous. As far back as third grade, Barbara could remember the terror that electrified her when she was called on in a school spelling bee. In school plays, she would try to be a tree or maybe even a flower. In high school, to avoid public speaking, she preferred to be the treasurer or the secretary of the organization and not the president. In college, she avoided classes. So you might ask, what was her career goal? Well, she wanted to be a behind-the-scenes accountant or researcher, and actually she did that for a while. But it was her strong personal beliefs that shoved her into the spotlight in the nation's most outspoken debate, abortion.
I think the only thing that would stop them from getting the service is if we closed our doors, and we won't do that. We will stay open.
Women's issues thrust Barbara into jobs that she had never expected. Barbara is Barbara Baldwin, the executive director of Planned Parenthood of Rhode Island. Is she still fearful of public speaking?
Absolutely. It's like fear of flying or anything. You know, you learn to deal with it, but I've never lost it. It's just I manage it better.
Are you nervous now doing this?
Yes.
As for avoiding speech in school?
Most of the people wanted to take public speaking because they thought they were going to use it in their careers. I knew I would never use it. I was going to be an accountant.